In this video, I'm going to do a professional scientific review of the Sony X85 LED LCD TV. Hello everyone, Vincent Teo from HDTV Test here. I'm a TV reviewer and professional calibrator. And this is the Sony KD55XE8596. That sounded like a very complicated UK postcode, so I'm going to call it the XE85 from now on. In my opinion, Sony has had a tremendously successful 2017 in terms of TVs, with great offerings at every price point. You've got the mid-range XE90, the step-up XE93, the full-array local dimming XE94, and the Bravia A1 OLED, and each of these TVs can be considered the best in its respective price class. The XE85 sits one rung below the XE90, featuring a native UHD LCD screen with HLED lighting, HDR support for both HDR10 and HLG formats, as well as Android Smart TV platform. The design is no frills and not a million miles away from last year's mid-range Bravias. The bezel is matte black and suitably slim, with a Bravia inscription on the top left corner. A band of silver accent splits the outer frame, making it as if two slates are glued together. The LCD panel sits on an open rectangular stand which sports a faux metallic finish, but is actually plastic in makeup. During assembly, we are slightly concerned that the stand feels wobbly in the hand and flexes so easily, but once it's fitted, the whole setup is more stable. The connections are found on the left side of the display. There are 4 HDMI ports, but as is the case with all Sony 4K HDR TVs we've tested to date, only HDMI input 2 and 3 support HDMI 2.0B at higher chroma and frame rates, and you'll need to go into the user menu to enable them. The power cable is affixed to the right side of the television. But you didn't really subscribe to this YouTube channel to hear me talk about design. There are many other lifestyle channels out there that can cover that better than I do. My specialty is picture quality, and presumably that's why you're here watching me doing whatever it is I'm actually doing here. Right, this 55-inch Sony X85 uses a VA-type LCD panel with true RGB subpixel configuration, as you can see from this macro shot here. If you don't already know by now, VA means deep blacks by LED LCD standards, but a narrower viewing angle. Once peak white was aligned to our darkroom target of 120 nits, native black level measured 0.084 candelas per meter squared on a 4x4 ANSI checkerboard pattern, but this can be lowered to 0.037 candelas per meter squared with frame dimming. I'll explain that in a second. Judging from our thermal scan, the Sony X85 is an H-lit LED LCD with only one strip of LED modules along the bottom border of the panel, illuminating the entire screen. The TV doesn't feature any local dimming or even pseudo-local dimming. Instead, it can only dim down the whole screen if needed. This is known as frame dimming or global dimming. On our review sample, this is effective in deepening the blacks or letterbox bars in dark scenes, as well as reducing several spots of backlight clouding. But unlike full-array local dimming LED LCDs, such as the XE90 and XE94, there's little to no increase in on-screen simultaneous contrast. The good thing about frame dimming is that you won't get any haloing or blooming artifacts, and on our review unit, there's little to no banding or dirty screen effect on brighter scenes, although you can see some slight darkening around the edges, which is common on Sony LED LCD TVs. After calibration, color fidelity is fantastic, with none of the 140 patches measured in the challenging Color Checker SG chart exceeding the visible inaccuracy threshold of Delta Error 3. Upscaling quality of the onboard X1 processor is very good. This SMPTE RP133 test pattern in 576i looked sharp and detailed without excessive ringing, which is only marginally behind more expensive Sony TVs with X1 Extreme chipset, and we're talking a really fine razor-thin margin here. Motion-wise, slow panning shots in 24 frames per second movies are free of telescenic judder without needing interpolation, and if you want to use interpolation to either improve motion clarity or smooth out judder even further, Sony's motion flow technology tends to introduce less artifacts than other brands. With motion flow switched off, baseline motion resolution on this horizontally scrolling test pattern was 300 lines, which is the expected figure for a sample and hold display. 1080 lines of motion resolution was achievable, but only with backlight scanning, which may dim the screen slightly. This can be easily compensated for by using other picture settings. For HDR, peak brightness after calibration to D65 white point came in at 380 nits on a 10% window, and because the TV doesn't feature any local dimming, full field peak brightness was the same at 380 nits. We did a spectral analysis and found that the Sony X85 uses PFS phosphor. Note the extremely narrow red band here. This allows the TV to achieve a wider color gamut, and indeed, DCI-P3 coverage measured around 95%. When watching 4K Blu-rays, HDR impact was limited due to the relatively low peak brightness and lack of local dimming, but at least the overall HDR picture looked suitably bright at the expense of sacrificing some specular highlight detail. For example, during the scene in the Ultra HD Blu-ray of Pan, which is mastered to 4000 nits, the sun, the cloud, and the bubbles were all blown out to a certain extent. This is entirely in keeping with Sony's HDR tone mapping philosophy to preserve APL, or average picture level, and on the X85, they've made the decision to clip even earlier, around 1000 nits, owing to the display's 400 nit peak brightness. Otherwise, panning shots were buttery smooth, and the onboard smoke gradation technology worked effectively to reduce posterization or